What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Wolfcryer here with a build review for Uliana's Exploding Palm from the PTR patch 2.6.4 for Diablo 3's upcoming Season 16. And this build got a pretty decent buff thanks to the buff to Uliana set, which now increases your Exploding Palm damage by 9,000%. So pretty big buff indeed. This is a GR 115 plus build for the upcoming season, and you can run this build non-season or season. The only thing that season allows you to do is with that Ring of Royal Grandeur buff, you now get to wear Lefebvre's Soliloquy, increasing your damage reduction. Now, you could opt for Frostburns instead and increase your damage by 20%, but I like the damage mitigation because it helps out a lot. So now, with the Royal Ring buff, you are looking at wearing Lefebvre's and your Spirit Guard, so you gain a ton of damage mitigation, plus you've got your belt. Let's go ahead and dive into the gear, and then we'll talk about the playstyle a little bit and the skills. First up, you're going to be running 5 pieces of Uliana's. You want the belt, pants, chest piece, helmet, and gloves for this build. Like I said, this is what's going to allow you to deal a ton of damage with that Exploding Palm. Now, on non-season, you're also going to wear the shoulders instead of Lefebvre's. And this is still going to give you all the damage buff that you need. This build is fully capable with or without that buff. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Then we're going to be running Binding of the Lost. This is going to give you a 5% damage reduction for 7 seconds for each hit with your 7-sided strike. And since you're running Lion's Claw, that's 14 hits. That's a big damage mitigation. Then you're going to wear Gungno Gears, which is going to allow your Exploding Palm's explosion to spread your Exploding Palm. Very important for EP builds. This is what's going to allow everything on the screen to get the Exploding Palm buff on it and let your 7-sided strike pretty much just obliterate everything. Then we're running the Traveler's Pledge Compass Rose set. While you're moving around, 50% damage reduction, and while you're standing still, you gain 100% damage increase. For your other ring, we are running Unity. This is going to give you another damage mitigation. Unity is very important to this build. Very helpful in a Greater Rift. You're going to run Unity. You're going to wear one. Your follower's going to wear one. He's going to have that relic that allows him not to die. And you're going to take 50% less damage. For your weapons, you're looking at Lion's Claw, which is going to increase your 7-sided strike to deal 14 strikes instead of 7 now. And Fist of Az, which is going to increase your Exploding Palms on death explosion by up to 500%. This is very important to the build. You definitely need Fist of Az. And what you're looking for on both these weapons is cooldown. The more often you can 7-sided strike, the better, because that's what's going to be dealing all of your damage. Plus, it's very helpful to stay in Epiphany so that you take even less damage from the enemies, and so forth. Over in the cube, you're going to be running Convention of Elements. This is going to give you a 200% increased damage to a single element. When this rolls around to your cold rotation, your 7-sided strike and your Exploding Palms are going to just deal a ton of damage, pretty much taking out most of the white trash mobs on the screen and dealing a chunk of damage to most of the elites. Then, like I said, you're running Spirit Guards for that 60% damage reduction. I prefer Spirit Guards in the cube over the Gungno Gears, but it's going to pretty much rely on which one's better for you for your build, because you want cold percent and you want 6% crit on those bracers that you're wearing, but having these in the cube gives you that full 60% damage mitigation. And your last cube item is going to be Flow of Eternity, which is going to reduce the cooldown of your 7-sided strike by 60% and increase its damage by 100%. That's not super useful, but it can be when it comes to Rift Guardian. Solo Rift Guardians are going to take a little bit longer, and you're going to need the extra damage to your 7-sided strike anyways, so very useful to have. Plus, you want that cooldown. That cooldown is very, very important. Now let's talk about the skills. First up, Epiphany, Desert Shroud. This is going to give you a 50% damage reduction and allow you to teleport around to mobs, pretty much allowing you to dash wherever you want. Then we're using Dashing Strike, Blinding Speed. This is going to give you 40% increased dodge chance for 4 seconds after every single dash. You're going to use this to get in and out of the fray, deal your damage, get back out, gather up more mobs, that sort of thing. Then we're using 7-Sided Strike, Sustained Attack. This is going to drop the cooldown of your 7-Sided Strike down to 14 seconds. Combined with your Flow of Eternity, you're going to be able to 7-Sided Strike a lot, which is very important for dealing your damage and for triggering that Binding of the Lost Belt damage mitigation. Then we use Exploding Palm, Impending Doom. This is where all of your damage is coming from. You deal a massive amount of cold damage to enemies when this pops, and your 7-Sided Strike is going to pop this every single time you cast 7-Sided Strike. You want to make sure that all the mobs do have the Exploding Palm buff on them first, and then 7-Sided Strike. Then we use Way of the 100 Fists, Assimilation. This is going to allow you to gain a damage stack based on the 3rd hit of this spirit generator. So you want to group up a ton of mobs, then apply your assimilation stack. This is going to give you an increased damage bonus, and then you'll 7-Sided Strike. Do keep in mind, as I've said in other videos, that you can reset your assimilation stacks. So you don't want to reset them to a lower value by attacking again on a smaller group of mobs when you've already got a big damage bonus. Then we use Cyclone Strike, Implosion to pull all the mobs into us. The more density, the more damage we're going to do with our Exploding Palms. For our gems, we are using Gogok of Swiftness. This is going to give you some more cooldown. This is going to give you more attack speed and dodge chance. Then we're using Bane of the Traps, which is going to give us a nice big damage buff. And Bane of the Stricken, which is going to allow us to take down the Rift Guardians faster than we would be able to without it. This is a very useful gem for taking down Rift Guardians. The one drawback of this build is it does not excel at dropping Rift Guardians very quickly, unless those Rift Guardians have a ton of adds. If there's mobs around the Rift Guardian, he's going to die relatively quickly, but solo Rift Guardians, this build kind of struggles with. And for your passives, I run Guardian's Path, gives you a 35% chance to dodge incoming attacks while you're dual wielding. I use Mythic Rhythm, which every 3rd hit from a spirit generator increases the damage of your next damaging spirit spender. This includes your manually applied Exploding Palms and your 7-Sided Strike. I'm not big on the manually applying your Exploding Palms, but it definitely helps with creating this buff and dealing a little bit more damage throughout the rift, but it does take a little bit to get used to. You pretty much apply your Mythic Rhythm stack on a small group of enemies, then jump into a big group of enemies, Exploding Palm one, and then 7-Sided Strike in order to spread that EP. But unfortunately, that takes a lot of practice. But it does deal a little bit more damage. You could try to test that out, see if you can get a little bit of practice with it. That is a better way to play this build as far as damage-wise. But it's still useful for your 7-Sided Strike, especially against the Elite Packs or Rift Guardians, because that's going to help you out greatly. Then I use Harmony. 40% of your elemental resistances from items instead get applied to all resistance. And Beacon of Ytar. This build requires a lot of cooldown. So you want to make sure there's cooldown from Beacon of Ytar. You want to make sure there's cooldown on your shoulders, both weapons, preferably your gloves, and you're wearing a diamond in your helmet. Cooldown is king with the Uliana's Exploding Palm build. You want to be able to 7-Sided Strike as often as you can. Keep in mind that 7-Sided Strike in itself kind of mitigates damage, because while you are in the process of using 7-Sided Strike, you cannot be targeted. You can avoid freezes that way. You can avoid molten explosions that way if you time your 7-Sided Strike correctly. So keep that stuff in mind as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you enjoyed this build review. There will be more coming for sure for Season 16. Not sure if I'm going to get them all done before the PTR ends, but either way, these will be coming. I'm also working on that monk tier list as far as what are the best monks going into Season 16 if all of these buffs stay intact, which hopefully they do, because I'm enjoying this patch. I'm enjoying this PTR. There's so many builds capable of 110, 115, 120 plus GRs. And that's pretty awesome. It's a great time to be a monk, and I'm really, really enjoying it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for taking the time out of your day to click this video. I always greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and you all have a fantastic day. Peace.